Item 9, ordinance 2026-002, 25% budget.
Ordinance to make appropriations for salaries and benefits and other expenditures for all funds during the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2026 for the first quarter only. There's a typo on this. This was added to the agenda by Ms. Lang, Mr. Prater, and Mr. R. Smith. I accidentally put Mr. T. Smith on there.
Ms. Lane?
Yes, tonight's ordinance 2026-02 is being presented. After additional discussions among administration, the state auditors, and myself, it has been recommended that we adopt this ordinance as a temporary budget with a permanent budget to be finalized by April the 1st, 2026. Approving this allows for appropriations for the first quarter to be put in place starting January 1st, 2026. This approach will ensure that the budget and the accompanying plan submitted to the state are aligned and will allow us to address any concerns that may raise while continuing to operate. First read would be tonight, the second read would be on 12/22, and the third read and passing of this temporary budget would be on 1/1 of 2026. I would like to make a motion to suspend Rule 56.
Mr. Rollins?
Okay, question. How many monthly reconciliations have we completed in 2025?
I believe that's for the auditor's office, right?
Have we done it every month? We know.
I couldn't hear the question.
How many monthly reconciliations have we completed this month, or this year?
This year, I don't know.
Of any? So what advantage would we have doing a quarterly budget versus passing an annual budget if we don't reconcile the books anyway?
Mayor?
Yes, somebody, anybody?
If I could add to what Councilwoman Lang said, some of it will be repetitive of what she said, and others will be new information. But on December 3rd, 2025, senior staff, the auditor, the deputy auditor, Finance Chair Lang met with Cindy and Amy from the Auditor of State's office. The following is a summary of that meeting and steps identified to move forward toward our goal of fixing those issues that have placed us in fiscal caution. Obviously, their number one thing that they've been telling us since we've started talking with them was that we have to cut expenses and explore possibilities for increasing revenue. Our first step in cutting expenses has been the submission of a balanced 2026 budget. We discussed this at length with them and were advised that the next step in the process would be to pass this as a temporary operating budget for the first quarter of 2026 and finalizing the rest of the year budget by April 1st of 2026. It was discussed that this step would allow us more time to see final 2025 numbers and better be able to adjust if needed prior to setting our full year budget for 2026. And if changes had to be made, they could be made prior to that. We discussed our nearly $9 million in deficit funds balances, and we were advised that we need to be able to show a plan to address these deficit fund balances and begin to pay them down over time, basically a payment plan. As long as our recovery plan addresses these funds and shows that we will be paying them down over time and not increasing those deficits, that this would be deemed acceptable by the state. Prior to January 23rd, 2026, we must submit a proposed improvement plan to fix our financial situations that have caused us to be deemed to be in fiscal caution. This plan must be approved by the state prior to implementation. The state will then supervise our efforts in following the approved plan and will determine if we are following the improved plan and making the necessary changes and fixing those issues that have been identified in the letter of fiscal caution. There was lengthy discussion about our current financial software system, New World, and the fact that it will never work as intended as the state, for state purposes. Cindy has been around since the inception of New World. The lady from the state has been around since New World was conceived here in the city of Marion, and believes that this system, as well as several other cities that use the same system, continue to have ongoing issues with the system. And if we stay with New World, our financials will never be accurate. She has suggested that we talk to a few other companies that are in use throughout the state of Ohio and are based in the state of Ohio. So they are very knowledgeable as to what is needed by the state for accounting purposes. We happen to know that the County of Marion currently uses Software Solutions, a company that they have used for several years. We have an introductory meeting that I've set up with Software Solutions on December 16th, 2025, just to gather information, try to wrap our mind around what this would cost if we went to a new system. We discussed the importance of the administration, the auditor, and council all working together on the same page to follow and implement our plan of action. The state will not care who the roadblock is, if there is one. They will just be concerned with the fact that we are not following our plan. If we are not following our plan, they could force us into one of the other categories, being fiscal watch or a fiscal emergency. I brought those handouts for everybody tonight. I think I've passed them out before, but it explains, Mr. Rollins, it explains exactly what each different category is and what the ramifications are for those categories. Sorry about that. And having our conversation with Cindy, obviously she said nobody wants us to even go to the next stage. And as long as we get a plan in place that we can all agree upon, and the state agrees to that plan, and we stick to the plan, we should be fine. In the hope of getting out of fiscal caution and get our bond rating back, hopefully within a couple years. So it's our hope tonight to be able to pass ordinance 2602 so the city can move forward into 2026, all while working to correct those things that have placed us into fiscal caution, and eventually be able to obtain our bond rating back. I know that you guys had asked for, and you should have all received, something that looks similar to this, which is where all the cuts were made in all the different departments. And these were all authored by those department heads of those departments. So you'll see there's no set standard for how they worded it or what they gave you guys. They just told you how they did it. I ran across an interesting piece of information today. I found annual budget reports, or the annual report from the mayor going back many, many years. I started looking through those reports and found that in 2002, we had a general fund budget of $15,817,000. That's more than what we have today, some 20 years, odd years later. That budget continually went up from 2002. I stopped looking at 2008. In 2008, the budget was $19,994,000. So we're well below either one of those some 20 years later, with the expenses rising, our revenue staying stagnant, and trying to operate a budget. So with all the hard work that the department heads put in, we were able to bring a budget to you that we anticipate to be, our expenses to be less than what our revenue is going to be. So it is our hope that whether it's first, second, third reading on the first, that we get this 2602 passed so we can move in to the first quarter of next year and then start making changes if we need to during that first quarter.
So Is it your wish then, or what you're asking is not to necessarily pass it, but to waive
No,
committee,
I'm not
to waive
asking-
committee consideration to be the first read, so we could be on point
That's
for a
correct.
third reading on
That's what
January
my hope
1.
is tonight, not meaning to
Okay.
pass it tonight,
Okay.
but
Waive committee consideration.
Waive committee consideration so we can have this act as our first reading and be on track to have our third reading on January 1st. I'll be glad to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Mr. Rollins?
Yeah. So I asked my question because I don't know, I still don't understand what passing a quarter of a year's budget gains us. In fact, I would just caution the rest of my council members that it's actually going to be a strain on the accounting offices that got us into this predicament to begin with, because they're going to have to adjust all of their books for a quarter of the budget. We did this last time we tried to run a deficit budget through, and it created more challenges than it did anything else. So I'm not understanding what the benefit here is of only passing a quarter of a year's budget. Someone help me understand.
Ms. Lang?
That was the recommendation of the state auditor's office. It was not our brainstorm, it was their recommendation. And the auditor's office was in agreement to be able to, that they would be able to do that and put that in place. So they are aware that, again, we'll have a quarter to operate. We have to have it in place and voted on by April 1st. So hopefully we could have it in place and even put it the permanent budget into place before April 1st.
If I could add one thing, I think what it does allow us to do during that first quarter is see exactly what our numbers are coming out of 25, exactly what the carryover will be, and also allow us to reconsider certain things that we have cut from the budget now, be it the tall grass program, be it Downtown Marion Inc., and if we see through that first quarter that we're functioning better than we thought we were going to, or we're not doing worse than we thought we were going to, we do have a little buffer there that we may be able to accommodate, more things, but we won't know that until later in the quarter.
Mr. Smith?
Did I read somewhere that we have to report back to the auditor's office every month?
Yes.
What was it?
Do we have to report back to the auditor's office every month?
At least monthly.
Yeah.
We will submit a report at least monthly on how our progress is going, although I think Cindy will have phone conversations on a regular basis with Chelsea. I know they have one set up yet for this week. And we are due, we have set up weekly meetings beginning this week to start. We've already started formulating our plan that we're going to send to the state. It's just a matter of us all getting together, because I can't say how the auditor's office is going to do reconciliations all the way back to 22. I mean, that's something I can't answer. That's something they're going to have to answer, and moving forward through 24 and 25. I can't answer how we cut expenses and that kind of thing. How we deal with the negative line items, I can help with that. But there are just certain things that I won't be able to answer that the auditor's office will have to.
Ms. Lang?
And that was the other thing that the state auditor's office emphasized, is that we did need to have year-end totals, so we knew exactly what our revenue was coming in and what our expenses are going out. The POs would be able to be closed, and those funds could be put back into, so it would change the budget on what we had as far as revenue. It just allows us the flexibility to have a more accurate budget by April 1st.
Mr. Schaub?
Do we have a second for?
We don't have a second.
No.
Okay, I will second that so we can carry on our discussion. We'll urge our council members to vote that down and send this directly to committee, so we can have all this discussion in committee. And I do not believe that the state auditor said pass a full budget but only release 25%. I believe they told the city to pass a temporary budget, and you must have the full annual budget passed by April 1st. That's chapter 5705. Anyone that can read and comprehend English, it's very plainly written, it's right there. So I would say that Finance Committee work on a salary operational only budget for the first quarter, and then, as the mayor said, then maybe we can build a full year's budget and add in those services that had already been cut in this, the original proposed budget that is sitting in committee right now. And council members can only pass a budget if we have the revenue to cover the expenses. It's state law that we cannot do that. And without reconciling for nearly 6 years, we have no clue what we have or what we do not have. And we also had negative line items. In our audit, in our letter for fiscal caution, it says $9 million, almost $9 million. The next sentence is, but we don't know if that's accurate. It could be worse. I'm assuming it will be worse, but we don't know. And until we have reconciliations, we have no way of knowing if a full annual budget or annual appropriation ordinance can even be funded. And by doing that, going blindly into it, we're adding to the negative line items that we already have. So I would encourage all council members to vote no on waiving Rule 56, put this in committee, that way it could have some more thought and build a true temporary budget and go from there.
Mr. Ralph.
I have at least 3 topics. One, I was under the understanding that Veritas had reconciliations completed through, I thought, 24.
Veritas reconciled the general account and the payroll account. We have several other accounts that they did not reconcile. They weren't hired to do that.
Okay.
The only year they reconciled all accounts was 2021.
My recollection is they were hired to give us the procedure on how to do it, and we have people that are refusing to do it.
Well, there's that too. We had, and I cannot remember if it was 24 or 25 that we passed a quarterly budget to start out with. 24.
24.
And from your standpoint, was that smoother than in 25 when an entire budget was passed?
I won't say it was, I think the issue was we didn't know where we were going to be. The problem that arises with a quarterly budget, or the first quarter, which I'm not sure I could hear Mr. Schauber accurately, but the state allows, the state is the one that recommended that temporary operational budget.
Right, a temporary, not a 25% of the full budget.
Right, which would be
Right.
25% of the full budget. But then a rest of the year budget has to be passed by April 1st. We can't do quarter by quarter.
Right.
Although I know it happened in 24, legally, I don't think you're supposed to do that. It has to, we have to have a full budget by April 1st. I think that's everybody's understanding that was at the meeting. The problem we do run into when we pass a quarterly budget is a lot of places may bill at the very beginning of the year for their annual subscription or their whole year service. That may well be over what the 25% allotted was. And what we have said this time and what we did last time, those departments that have that issue come up will have to come to council with an additional appropriation ordinance to get additional money appropriated. So they won't be able to just blindly say, well, this subscription's due, we gotta pay it, and then pay it. They'll have to come to council and ask for additional funding to do that because they only have 25%. So it can happen, but they would have to come and ask for it.
My question was, which one was smoother?
Absolutely, in a perfect world, a full year budget would be great.
And
But in an imperfect world, not knowing what we're going to close out 25 with, and then still not being really sure what those numbers are, it may give us that latitude during the first quarter to adjust things.
And I say that and I ask that because I think I already know the answer. And I was a big supporter of the 25, and I think we did a 50% at that year too. And
24.
but I learned through the process that creates problems and issues. And I learned through the process that it even creates problems and issues with the individual line items, because when departments come and ask for additional appropriations and then you pass the full year's budget, you actually gave them more than what the full year's budget was, because the additional appropriation in '24 was on top of the full year's budget.
Correct.
And so it actually created more problems and cost more money the way that we did it. And again, I was a big supporter of it, and I really thought, okay, we're going to be able to, really have oversight over this, and you actually have less at the end. My other question is that procedurally, the full budget is still in committee.
Right.
This is now passing 25% of a full budget that is still in committee. And I'm not sure procedurally that this is proper. I know I talked to the law director about it, and I had not seen the actual ordinance and the attachments with it, and he had indicated that it's a different number and it's different than what is in committee. However, it hinges off of what is in committee, and I don't know how you can pass part of an ordinance that hasn't even passed out of committee yet. It just procedurally doesn't make sense.
So we did have a conversation, and this ordinance was drafted last Wednesday afternoon and was tendered to the clerk Thursday morning. It was after the meeting with Cindy and Amy from the state of Ohio. And those administrators in the conference room for 4 hours did a lot of listening. And the one thing that was clear from Cindy was the first step in removing the city of Marion from fiscal caution is to adopt a quarterly budget for 26, period. This ordinance, in a way, mirrors what we did in 24, because in 24, the annual budget was attached and it said at 25%, as amended by council, to provide only for the first quarter of 2024. This does exactly the same thing. It has essentially the annual appropriations, and in the caption and in the body it says at 25% for the first quarter. So this is something we have done before. More importantly, this is what Cindy from the state auditor, who is working with us to remove ourselves from fiscal caution, to get to the point where we can recover a bond rating and borrow monies to do important things for our community. So I take issue with the fact this is a proper procedural step. It's not 2601, it's 2602. The difference being this appropriates 25% of next year's budget only, like we did in 24. And it's consistent with a temporary budget under the Ohio Vice Code. It's in the format to be acted on, at least in a first reading tonight, a second reading at the next council meeting, and the timing would be such that it'd be up for the third reading on the first day of January of 26.
The biggest issue I have with your comparison is that in 24 there was an amendment to 2024-01 that passed out of committee, and we amended 2024-01 to be 25% of each line item. You are now taking what the 2026 total budget is inside the ordinance of something that's still in committee.
It's not in committee. 2601 is in committee. It went through committee 2 times. I don't remember one participant on the committee making any suggested changes to it. This is not 2601. This is 2602. It is different in that the appropriations associated with it are for the first quarter of the year only. What's in committee and would remain in committee is the appropriation that was presented for the entire year. And as the mayor said, and I've tried to reiterate, the State of Ohio Auditor's Office, who's assisting us removing ourselves from fiscal caution, getting to the point where we can recover a bond rating and do important borrowing. This is the process that they recommended we take. I urge council members to waive Rule 56 and let this be the first reading.
So if I could ask on page 3, when it says 2026 total budget, are those numbers what's in committee?
Only 75%.
There's a process available under Robert's Rules if council's interested in it. Right now, there's a motion to waive the committee consideration. I think that's proper. But if a majority of council believes under Robert's Rules we could provide clarity, or council can provide clarity, I would suggest there be a motion to discharge this matter from committee and have a vote on discharging this so there's no confusion. The council approving a motion to discharge removes that question whatsoever. I don't have an issue with it. I believe this is a different ordinance. I believe it's properly before council for its first reading once committee consideration is waived. But to remove any doubt, I would recommend there be a motion to discharge the Finance Committee.
Ms. Lang?
I'll make a motion to discharge from committee.
We already have a motion on the floor to waive Rule 56. Are you rescinding that motion
I will rescind that motion.
and make a motion to discharge?
The motion to discharge. Make a motion to discharge from committee.
Discharge
Charge what?
The,
Any issue related to the budget?
thank you.
Thank you.
So ordinance
No, just any issue related to the budget. This is essentially, if it receives a majority vote, the motion to discharge will make clear for the record that this matter is properly before the council for its first reading this evening.
So we have a motion.
We have a motion.
I'll second.
Mr. R. Smith, seconds. Take roll.
Mr. Barr,
Yes.
Mr. Ratliff,
No.
Mr. Schauber,
No.
Ms. Lynn,
Yes,
Mr. T. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Prater,
Yes.
Mr. Dickville,
Yes.
Mr. R. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Rollins.
No.
6-3, motion carries. Item 10, ordinance 2025-128, salary reductions ordinance. Clerk, if you read.
So, we're done?
that means that council is first
Wait to see
read.
a hand. Moving on, I didn't see
We
anything.
still have to waive Rule 56.
I'd suggest you move to waive Rule 50.
And I still suggest that council says no and send this back to committee because that's where it's supposed to be at. And I guarantee you, this is our first test from the auditor of state, and we are failing at putting our name on it.
Anything else from council? On item 9? Mr. Ratliff?
In committee, I know we had discussion about other departments not giving a 10% reduction, and, you know, I know the mayor was going to talk to the judge, I don't know, you know, and so since nothing is in committee anymore, I will ask if every department has taken cuts. I know in our packet of what each department's going to do with the cuts, we don't have every department, and so I just am not sure what each department's doing and if each department took the cut they were supposed to. And I think council should ensure that. You know, we can see by our cuts that are, if you look on page 2 of your packet that we got with the cuts under police personnel, it says removal of unfulfilled police officer positions, $394,000. I'm assuming that's for 4 positions, possibly 5, but I'm assuming it's 4. And a voluntary layoff of 1 officer, which would be $96,000. So I'm assuming that's 5 positions that's going to be unfulfilled in the police department. And then I came up and talked to the auditor last week, and the same court that's not taking a 10% cut in the special revenue line item funds that she has created over the years has $2.188 million sitting there in just money that she has accumulated that used to come back to the general fund. And so I don't know how we can just, have good discussion in a committee, discharge it from committee, pass it and move it along when we have huge problems budgetarily about different departments taking different advantage of the situation. And I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's fair to the employees, and I don't think it's fair to the citizens.
Mr. Schauber.
Yeah, I guess I don't expect an answer either, Mr. Ratliff, but could someone explain the transfer out, how it was reduced $4.2 million? Or even what a transfer out is?
So transfer out would be from the general fund to support some of the other said funds that those transfers would go to. And if you looked at the original versus the updated one that was presented more recently, the parks was lowered by $300,000, pool 175, police was lowered by $2 million, and fire by $1 million.
So a transfer out supports another department. It goes from general fund out to another department. So
Correct.
if I understand, so we reduced that by $4.2 million, taking that to a total of around $6 million, if I am correct, for all the transfer outs total. Historically, it's around $8.5 million that this transfer out has funded these various departments. So in essence, what we did by reducing this transfer out line item, it's not a cut, it's just to make it look like there's a reduction in the budget, and you're starving those other departments further downstream at the end of the year.
So part of doing this, though, was going back to cleaning up those negative line items that were addressed in the fiscal caution letter from the auditor of state. Part of the plan that the administration is going to put forth with addressing each one of those bullet points that has to be submitted by January 23rd is addressing, again, the transfers out and how we clean those up with those negative balances. That would be an adjustment that would be made before the final budget is, or the permanent budget is passed on April 1st.
But if the departments historically need a total of $8.5 million, that means that they will be coming at the end of the year, or towards the end of the year, for an additional appropriation. I believe the police department, unless you made significant cuts in your department, or whatever revenue or restricted funds that goes through this transfer out, you're going to be asking for $1.2 million.
We made $1.2 million in cuts.
They did.
But that's left money from the transfer out that would be needed.
Are those dollars directly tied to the transfer out?
My understanding is that the police department is funded 2 ways. One is when we passed tax increases in the past, some of that money is dedicated to the police department. Other parts come from the general fund. That's the transfer out from the general fund into the police department that was cut. So the cuts that we made are to the benefit of that general fund that reduces the transfer into the police department. And they are, that we cut the 1.2 and she's taken the 1.2 out of that flow from the general fund into the police department. That's my understanding of how those 2 things are connected.
But we haven't identified that pool of money, if it's from the income tax, which part of the income tax that was either devoted 25%, I believe it's 25%, you get a portion of that, or if it's the overall income tax revenue.
Yeah, that's above what I was asked to do.
Yeah. Thank you.
And that's,
Yes, sir.
and that's the same for a lot of those. It's the same for fire, it's the same for transit, it's the same for parks, it's the same for the pool. If we cut what those people are spending, that's less we have to transfer out from the general fund to each one of those departments. So this whole budgeting process can be very confusing. It is very confusing. I'm certainly not an expert on accounting, never claimed to be. That's what we have an auditor's office for, as a budget director, to help with that. And it still gets confusing. But I'm very confident in the fact that the state says our first step in fixing this problem and getting out of fiscal caution is to pass this quarterly budget, which we have brought in under what we anticipate our revenue to be. And I'm confident that we're going to be able to do that. And I'll reiterate the last paragraph of what I said earlier. State doesn't care who the roadblock is. If we have a roadblock and we're not able to meet our obligations, or we're not able to stay with the plan that we presented, they don't care who it is. And they don't have to go necessarily to fiscal watch next. They can go straight to fiscal emergency. And nobody wants that, trust me.
Ms. Lang?
I will reiterate what he said. She was very clear that if she doesn't care who the roadblock is, they will not hesitate to take us from watch to emergency, if that's what it takes. And if they do that, then they come in, they take over, and then we go back and we operate at 85% of our approved budget for 2025. And we have to stay within that. And they will monitor that, they will control it, and we will have no say.
Mr. R. Smith?
Do we have a motion on the floor to suspend Rule 56? I thought Mr. Shower.
I don't believe so.
I did not make that motion, I just questioned if we wanted to do it tonight or not.
If we need to make that motion, I'll make a motion to suspend Rule 56.
I'll second.
Take roll.
Mr. Barr?
Yes.
Mr. Ratliff?
No.
Mr. Schauber?
No.
Ms. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. T. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Prater?
Yes.
Mr. Dickville?
Yes.
Mr. R. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
No.
6-3. Motion carries.
Good evening and welcome to the Watchmen's Report. I'm Cody Higley, and tonight we're joined by Jason Foreman and a very special guest who is becoming a recurring guest, much to our delight, is Councilman Ralph Smith, who still represents at large on Marion City Council, but he will soon be sworn in as the Republican councilman representing the 3rd Ward. So, Ralph, welcome back to the Watchmen's Report.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, well, we had Mr. Ron Prater on last night, your colleague in council, and we kind of got Ron's opinion on some of the topics that came up at the city council meeting this past Monday. So we want to talk a little bit about some of those hot topics, not spend a ton of time on them, and then we want to dig a little bit deeper into the IT questions, since that came up in Mayor Collins' statement about his meeting with the auditor of state representatives and them admitting that the city of Marion needs a new financial software system, needs to replace New World because it will never work. And by implication of that statement, it has never worked. So that's kind of what we're going to focus on. We've got Bobbie Walker, it looks like, waiting on deck there to join us. And with her background in the private sector, information technology, she can add some commentary as well. But I want to start out, I really don't want to spend much time on this because I don't care really, but the commercial building code enforcement department is moving forward for a period of at least 12 months. You guys did put that amendment in there. I think that was very wise. Just briefly, Ralph, do you have any additional thoughts on that, or kind of what swayed you to vote in favor of it?
Well, I talked to several people that have businesses here in town. I talked to contractors, a couple of contractors. It seems that most of the ones I talked to said, yes, they had problems. And I mentioned at one of the council meetings that I have a friend who owns a business in Waldo, and they also bought a building here on Bellefontaine Avenue, right down the street here. And they wanted to open up a business there. And they've been waiting on electricity or electric inspections, and they can't do anything until they get those done. So it's kind of like, you got the gun loaded, but you can't shoot it because somebody has to check the ammunition. And so, that based on those kind of things, I figured that's going on quite a bit. Now, we had a few people that said they've never had a problem, and I'm sure that they haven't. But I think the majority of contractors have trouble getting inspections and getting plans okayed. And I think that this procedure, even though it is a company out of Columbus, this procedure will speed up the process and therefore save money for the builders and the end user.
Yeah, and I think that it's worth a shot. If there's no cost to the city of Marion or the taxpayers of Marion by pursuing this, then see if it works. If it doesn't work, in a year, you guys reconvene and you repeal it, right? I mean, that's kind of what Ron's thoughts were.
Yeah, exactly. Because, it's got the 12-month clause in there, and it was said to us that it would be, a zero cost factor because the fees would cover anything that we did. And at the end of 12 months, we're going to look at that. And maybe even before then, maybe quarterly or semi-annually, but we'll be looking at those figures and see, okay, is this really costing us? Is it not costing us? Or, what's happening? And then we'll make a decision based upon those figures.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. Next topic here, Ralph, is the pay increases. So that did not to delay the pay increases for council. did not pass. It got a first reading, so I think we've got two more unless you guys suspend the rules on that. But what are your thoughts? I know at the last regular meeting of city council, you were the first one to speak up and to volunteer to give away your $3,000 pay increase that's set to come in place here on January 1st, 2026. So definitely you were the one that kind of led the charge on that for city council, kind of sharing some of the burden of these austerity measures and these cuts, which
Right.
I commend you guys on that. I mean, we're not talking about a lot of money. I mean, $3,000 a year probably isn't going to make or break anybody on council, but it's a good gesture, don't you think?
Well, I think so. And when you're standing there and you're saying we're going to have to cut 10% of the fire department, 10% of the police department, 10% of sanitation, and you're taking away services or, supplies, and for us to sit back here and say, you guys do all that, but we're going to take our raise, that just didn't sit right with me. And, I'm retired. That money didn't matter to me one way or the other. When I ran for council, I didn't even know that we got paid. I was surprised to find out that we got $9,000 a year. But I think it's only fair that we give that up. The thing that I did not care for, it was brought up at the meeting, was the treasurer, because the treasurer is in that same ordinance as far as getting the pay raise. And so we requested that the treasurer be left to get the raise. And she might have come into the job expecting to get $12,000 a year. I don't know. And I'm personally, I don't think that it will bother her. But the fact is that she had no say in it. She had no vote or anything. It's just, they want to take her $3,000 away too. I don't think that's right. I think the people that are on council, if we all vote yes and say hold it for 2 years, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm sure that Vidya probably doesn't care about $3,000. She's a retired former CEO of a credit union, Pillar Credit Union, formerly Marion Community Credit Union. I get what you guys are saying with that she did not voluntarily offer to forego it or to delay it. You guys are delaying it. The ordinance was written to where it'll be delayed until January 1st, 2028. So I get that. I probably would reach out to her, and that's what I told Ron Prater, is I said, somebody should give her a call and say, do you care? Because I think it would be a good gesture for her to do that, because if nothing else, there's going to be people that are going to focus on that. They're going to say, oh, council gave the treasurer a $3,000 raise and we couldn't replace this city worker, or we had to cut night moves transit, or we had to do XYZ. Just from a public relations standpoint, I would consider talking to her to see if she has a problem with it. If she has a problem and she's like, man, I was gonna, buy a, I don't know, new dining room set or something with that money, and that's why I ran. I ran for the compensation. I don't think anybody, when you're talking 9,000, 12,000, nobody runs for money. Even if you were to double it, how Schauber wanted to double it when he initially proposed those pay increases, he wanted council to make $20,000 a year, and he wanted the auditor and the law director and the mayor to make a hell of a lot more money than what they're making currently. I don't think that's gonna, like you said, you didn't even know that you got paid. If you are interested and volunteering or working for your city to try to make it better, then the money should be the last thing in your mind. Don't you think? I mean, am I wrong with that?
No, and that's exactly it. I became a council member because I wanted to do a civic duty. I felt that I've lived here for 40 some years, and I need to start paying back some of the good things that's happened to me in this town. And so I decided maybe I can get on council and maybe be able to do some good. As far as the raise goes, if you're asking 10% from every department, in effect, council gave up 33 1/3% of their entire wage budget, which is more than the 10%. So I think that we went above and beyond what was needed.
Yeah, no, like I said, I think it was a very good gesture. With the treasurer, with Vidya coming on, I would probably, just me personally, I mean, $3,000 again isn't going to make or break the city's budget, fiscal caution, or not, and it's not going to make or break Vidya and Gar's checkbook. So I'd probably just talk to her and say, hey, does this bother you? If we did this and just delayed it until 28, would it bother you? And just go from there. That's probably how I would handle it, because I know what the critics are going to say. I know how they're going to handle it. They're going to push that, and people will just hear one little thing and they'll say, oh, they gave the treasurer a raise. And even if the fact of the matter is that it's only $3,000, that 3,000 will be quickly turned into 30,000 and then 300,000. It's the snowball effect. That's how it works.
Right.
And these people are pretty vicious. So just that's a word of caution from the Watchmen's report for the leaders of the city of Marion. But again, it's a great gesture, and you were the one that kind of got that ball rolling at the last meeting. So good job with that. The next,
I was going to try to do that even if council didn't step up. I was going to try to do that on my own. So
yeah, because I think you even proposed a motion, and then I think Barr was like, well, we've got something in the works.
So I want to make a comment, even though I'm not a citizen of Marion or Ohio, but if this was happening here in my city and I'm looking at it from a citizen here, and we've got a council member who is not like everyone else is not taking their pay increase or whatever you want to call it, and one person is, I'm going to look at it as to why. So I agree with Cody, is ask her, put it to her and see if she's acceptable, if she's accepting that, if she doesn't, I mean, hey, it's all, it's all on her. But yeah, I agree. Leave it up to her if she wants to accept that same proposal that you're putting forth for the pay.
knowing what I know about Vidya, she would 100% be in favor of giving up the 3,000. She would have no problem with that, from what I know about her.
Yeah, I think if nothing else, it'd be an opportunity to say, hey, welcome aboard. You're going to be joining us here in a couple of weeks. And this topic came up. We're currently trying to delay our pay increases and just kind of feel her out, see where she thinks. But I do, and just like what Ron said last night, they want it as a gesture, or he sees it as a gesture of good faith to her to say, we want you to do a good job and all that stuff. And she should. I mean, she was the CEO of a credit union. I really don't think that the amount of work, and even Tommy Reese has admitted that, like, his job duties are fairly minimal. And even if you wanted to say that there's a few additional expectations moving forward as we go through this auditor of state, fiscal caution, kind of changing a few things on how we operate in the city of Marion, it's still not going to be that difficult of a job. That's why it's part-time, and that's why the compensation is what it is. but she should do well. She should be set up for success, I think, in that role. But we all know we have to fix the auditor's office. So, you know, there's bigger fish to fry, but I get it with the goodwill gesture, you know. I get that too. It's not a lot of money. We're not, you know, if it was $30,000, then I'd probably be screaming from the rooftops too.
Oh, me too.
People wanted
Yeah.
to try to give that. But that kind of brings us into the next topic here. The mayor made a statement, and it was in context of the proposed quarterly budget that was submitted. It was sponsored by Councilwoman Twyla Lang, Ron Prater, and then you yourself. And the amended or revised 2026 budget is still sitting in committee. So after the department heads made the 10% cuts that were requested by Mayor Collins, and Mayor Collins also trimmed some additional fat, trimmed that proposed 2026 budget down by $5 million, got it below expenses, or got expenses below revenues projected. We got to put that in there, that it's just, it's projected at this point. Despite that, Councilman Aaron Rollins and Councilman Ayers Ratliff voted against submitting that to council. This was during the finance committee meeting the prior week, and they voted against submitting it to you guys for additional changes or revisions, additional consideration. And in response to that, there was a new ordinance that was drafted, 2026-02, which was a quarterly. So it was 25% of what that revised 2026 annual budget amount was. And that itself created some controversy, Ralph. Now, Mayor Collins and Councilwoman Twyla Lang said that this was something that the Auditor of State officials said that the city of Marion needs to do as part of its plan to tackle this fiscal caution status. Is we want to see a quarterly budget, and we want you guys to work together on things, and you're going to have to make some additional changes, obviously. What was your takeaway on that particular part of the meeting, Ralph?
Well, I think, I don't know if all the members of council have a clear understanding of what that 25% budget is. That's not something that we came up with on our own. That's something that the Auditor of State said, this is what you need to do. Now, in my opinion, adopting a 25% budget for the first quarter is nothing more than a continuing resolution like the feds do all the time. They haven't had a whole budget in years. So basically, what they're saying is we want you to adopt a continuing resolution using your next year's budget and take 25% of that for the first quarter. And what that's going to do is buy us some time to get our act together. We've got until January 23rd to submit a plan as to how we're going to handle this fiscal caution thing. And if that plan is not satisfactory to the auditor, they will jump us straight into fiscal emergency. They can go straight from caution.
And that's the worst level. That's the worst level. That's like, that's takeover level.
Yeah, because what they said is that they will take our budget that we are supposed to have for 26, they will cut that to 85%. And that's what we would operate on. And then anything that we wanted to appropriate money for would have to go through the state auditor's office. Council would, we might pass an ordinance allocating funds, but then the state auditor is going to look at it and say, nah, we can't let you do that. So it's like you have a big brother sitting on your shoulder, and everything you want to do has to be okayed by the big brother. And we don't want that. So what we're trying to do is to pass the 25% budget. And admittedly, there's going to be situations like, okay, all of a sudden a meteor falls from the sky and goes through the roof of City Hall. We're going to have to get the money to fix that. You know, we can't have that sitting around and wait until the rest of the year. So there's going to be some things that might come up that are going to be outside of that 25% budget. But we'll have to deal with those if and when they happen. We can't speculate. We can't say it's never going to happen, because anything can happen. But yeah, I think the 25% budget needs to be approved. We need to get it into operation, and we need to get our plan together and make sure that it's satisfactory to the auditor of state, so they don't jump down our throats and start riding us on their shoulder.
Yeah, and the question that I had, I mean, I know Ratliff and Shaver and maybe Rollins, if I recall. I mean, they were the ones that voted against it. And you have Rollins and Ratliff who were on Finance Committee. They did not vote to send that draft proposal of the 20 after it was revised, after it was cut with a target of 10%. Right. Per department. Not every department did 10%, as far as I understand. But they cut $5 million, and they did get projected expenses below revenues in the general fund. So I don't really know what they wanted to do. So they voted against sending it on to council for additional changes or consideration. So next Finance Committee comes up, are they going to do anything? Like, they didn't say, I want to see this department with an additional cut. Now, Ratliff kind of got on into the municipal court budget, which I've looked at it from a historical comparison. I'm not there. I don't see the additional expansion onto the third floor and everything that he mentioned. I'm sure that probably is factual if he's there and he sees it, but I've seen their numbers. I mean, it is substantial growth over a relatively short period of time. That is probably something that needs to be considered, and I know the history of it, that they got into it with the current municipal court judge at one point in time when they were trying to appropriate funds for municipal court. So I get it. I get the history and everything, but that aside, was there anything else that they were really advocating for to make additional changes?
Well, I don't know of anything in particular except for the court. And they were talking about $2.1 million sitting out there not being used, and they could give part of that back. Well, I believe this Judge Finnegan, he used to give that back. But
that's what Ratliff said, yeah.
But it wasn't legal to do that. Nobody ever called him out on it, but it's not legal. That money is grant money, and it's grant money that's appropriated or given with the expectation that you're going to use it for the purpose that you say you're going to use it for. So you can't take in a grant and say, we want a grant for, let's say, the fire department, and we need to buy a new truck and some new uniforms or whatever, and get the grant money, and then give it to the police department to do something else with, because that's a misuse of the grant. And
so those funds that Finnegan gave back, you confirmed that those were grant funds that the municipal court had received?
That's what I was told.
Oh, wow. Well, then there you go. Then you're exactly correct. I mean, you have to use this for a particular purpose, right?
Nobody ever questioned that. Except that Judge Ballinger hasn't been given that. She's using it for whatever she needs to use it for. But she's not obligated to give that back. And I'm sure, if she did give it back, somebody could crowd around on it. The grant placements could request that money back. Or, they could come back and say, we're not going to give you any more grants because you're not using it for what you say you're going to use it for. So
Right.
they have to keep that in consideration too.
Yeah, if those were grant funds, then yeah, that's a horse of a different color, as they say in the Wizard of Oz. Sometimes it seems like the Land of Oz, doesn't it, around here?
Yeah. Well,
kinda-
the information about Judge Finnegan giving that back came to me out of the auditor's office. So that's where it came from. That he was giving it back, but it wasn't quite legal to do that. But nobody ever questioned it. And I think it's great that he did it, but I don't want to see anybody get into problems with grants or anything like that by doing
certainly.
something they're not supposed to.
We need as much grant money as we can get,
Yes.
So yeah, we can't piss off these people that are providing some of these non-matching grant funds or what have you. But yeah, I mean, that was my question is, okay, so what are you guys holding this up for? Because you want to see us go after the municipal court first before we approve this, sending this on for additional changes and consideration by council so that it can try to meet the auditor of state's deadline and the state of Ohio's deadline on having an approved budget in place. Because other than that, I didn't hear anything else as to what their objection was. So then you come back and they say, you guys propose this quarterly budget, and they say, oh no, this is procedurally incorrect. This needs to go back to finance committee for consideration. And I'm thinking, what? So it can sit there and get moldy? Like, what's your solution? Like, offer some solution. Say, well, 5 million isn't enough. I want to see 7 million, and these are my suggestions for the additional $2 million. Isn't that what you should do, Ralph? If you're going to bitch and you're going to like say something, then bring the receipts, right?
Well, I always believe, Cody, and if you're going to present a problem to somebody, then you need to also present a possible solution, at least one. Now, my takeaway from that meeting the other night was that they want to see 10% from every department. Okay. If one department does 15%, that doesn't excuse another department only doing 5%. So I think that's what they're after, is they want to see 10% from every department, because it's unfair for one department to do 15% while another one does 5%. So, and that's their thinking. But the overall goal is to get the budget down to where it balances. And I think that's what was accomplished.
Yeah, I mean, it's not seeing the forest through the trees, and the bigger picture, like, you're in fiscal caution. Here it is, December 10th. We got to move forward. We have to start working together. We have these department heads, and we've got these people who are going to be making some sacrifices. We're trying to, show a good gesture of delaying our pay increase. Come on, guys. Stop this petty squabbling. Get on board. If you have some constructive recommendations, it doesn't mean once it goes to in front of general counsel or full council, that there can't be additional changes to it, right? I mean, you guys can, before you approve it, you can make some additional corrections, changes, whatnot. So if you got something that you really want to come up with, put it out there.
Yeah, I agree. And as far as moving things out of committee, when you move something out of committee, you're not necessarily saying I'm for it. You just move it so that rather than 3 people decide what's going to happen, you want 9 people to decide. You want to get all of your council people in there so that they can discuss it, come up with ideas. I have voted to move something out of committee that I know I was going to vote no on, unless something changed my mind, it was going to be a no vote. And so, but I think our responsibility, our obligation is to get it out of committee so that the full council can debate it, so that the public can come in and debate it, and we can get a good, solid read on it and vote for it.
Yeah, and that's what was Twyla when she wanted to move it to council with no recommendation. So yeah, she wasn't even trying to say, I want to approve this as is. No, we need to get this out in front, like you said, get it out in front of full council for additional consideration and processing. So, and real quick before we move on to the IT with Jay and Bobbie, there was a little bit of chatter that I've heard, and it came up at the meeting with the high grass. This was at the committee meeting last week.
Mm-hmm.
But that was cut. So high grass had a budget. I don't know if off the top of my head, it was something like $60,000. So probably one person, maybe 2 people going out and cutting grass, yards and stuff, from negligent owners, derelict owners who allow them to grow higher than, I think it's the ordinance in Marion's, 12 inches for grass. What is it?
6 inches.
Okay, 6 inches. And then if you go through the process and city notifies you and you don't mow your grass, city will come out there, mow it, and then they send you the bill or put it on your property taxes. So they cut that program, and there was a bit of squawking on that. Councilman Schauber says, well, that's going to be the number 1 or number 2 behind potholes. So just you all wait. You're going to get all these complaints, and then we're not going to have anybody to do it. Well, I was looking through the old budgets, and I think in 2023, that was a line item underneath the safety director. So that wasn't a separate fund like it is today.
Mm-hmm.
So that and it was about half the cost. So my guess is they probably just, had their employees or what. Do you know anything about that? I mean, it's not like these yards are not going to be cut, right? I mean, it'll just go back under the safety director, I would think.
Well, and I don't understand, Cody, in 2014, I worked for the health department. And at that time, tall grass complaints came to the health department. Mm-hmm. We handled it all. We had a enforcement guy who would go out and answer those complaints. I don't know exactly when it went from the health department to the city. But I mean, I think it probably should go back to the health department, because tall grass does present a health problem. You get rodents in there. You get all kinds of things in tall grass. And, 6 inches is not very high when you look at some of these places that have 12 and 14 and 16 inches and weeds standing up to your waist. Mm-hmm. And those kind of things definitely present a problem. So I would like to see it go back to the health department. And if that's the case, then we wouldn't have to worry about it anyway.
Has anybody mentioned that will be what happens? Because again, I saw on 23 and before, it was a line item under the safety department. Mm-hmm. So if it's going to go back to the health department, do we have confirmation of that? Like, has anybody reached out to them and said, hey, if we stop funding this, you guys will take back over because that's the law? I mean, has anybody confirmed that?
I'm not aware of anybody that has contacted the health department asking or requesting that. The only thing I've known is is it used to be there, now it's here in the city, and now they're going to have to cut it back or get rid of it altogether. So I'm sure that someplace, somewhere, someone will pick it up and take care of that problem, because I just don't think it's a problem that's going to go away, and it'll be a blight. Because I tell you, in the summertime, you probably see it too, but I drive by a bunch of houses that have tall grass. And for some reason, other people don't seem to want to mow their grass. So I'm sure that something will be done. I just don't know what yet.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I do too. I don't think they're just gonna say, oh, well, just let the yards become jungles and that sort of thing. I mean, no, I think they'll maneuver it some way, whether or not it's the health department or somebody from that reports to the safety director or what have you. All right, we've covered enough of the meat and potatoes of this week's council meeting, except for one, which is kind of what we're going to turn it over to Bobbie and Jay here. When Collins made his address, which Jay posted that before tonight's show so that it was playing, he admitted that the Auditor of State said that New World, that's the city's financial software system that they've had in place since July of 2009, that they installed during the height of the Great Recession at a cost of nearly $1 million, annual service fees, I think in excess of $100,000, is what I've been told. All these documented issues with it going back to the date of installation, which we have been bringing up, people calling us conspiracy theorists and crazy, even though we have the citations, whether it be statements from Veritas, who was the third-party company that the city contracted with to help balance its books, whether it was in meeting minutes, newspaper articles, what have you, audit reports. Oh, you guys are crazy, you know what you're talking about, blah, blah, blah. Now Collins says that, oh, hey, yeah, they said that this will never work. And the one gal for the Auditor of State, she said she's been dealing with the city of Marion since New World was installed in 2009, and she was very well acquainted with its deficiencies, with its problems. So I think that we're vindicated, boys. So, we gotta do a little dance, get down tonight, not at the city's expense or anything, but just saying, like, people were really coming at us hardcore, criticizing us. And all we were doing is saying, hey, look at this, the system that is being used when they pull a report, let's say it was for December 2025, let's see all the expenditures, and you go in there and you pull December 2025 in New World, and it would tell you, oh, there was $1 million. And then 10 seconds later, you say, I'm going to rerun that report to see what that figure was. Type in December 2025, hit enter, and it says, oh, it was $12 million. The same, Veritas said that. They said we would run the same report chronologically back to back, the same data, and it would give us different data, different information. I don't know how anybody can argue with that. And then you've got people on council now that have been very vocal critics of what we've been doing, exposing this, especially Jay. Jay's been this is his baby. This is his brain, this is his thing. He's been screaming from the rooftops and stuff. Oh, you guys are crazy, a bunch of conspiracy theorists, tinfoil hat wearing bearded idiots over there on the Watchmen's report. And I'm thinking, you've been in office for 20 years. You have been hearing testimony. You've been reading these reports for years. Where the hell were you? Why have you done nothing? you're going to sit here and you're going to criticize us for pointing out something that you should have pointed out back then, 15 years ago? You know, I don't know. What do you think, Ralph?
Well, I think, you know, you can't argue with facts. If the report says one thing and it's coming up different every time, then there is a problem. I believe that when the system was installed, it was installed either improperly or it was installed with certain features turned off intentionally, or maybe they've just forgot to do it. But how would you forget to do something over 23 years? You know?
Right.
I mean, it just doesn't seem feasible that you could ignore something that long unless you ignored it on purpose.
Exactly. And it was all there. And then this brings up a very good question, I think, that needs to be asked. You had, in the context of the cybersecurity and additional amendments and some things that came up, you had the IT manager, Jacob Bolden. He says, oh, no, there's no truth to this. Everything has been fine. Nothing to see here. Okay, which is it? Is it the auditor of state saying that this will never work and this is messed up, and then all the other documentation going back for years? Or is it Jacob Bolden saying, nope, everything's fine, everything's fine?
Well, yeah, if you ask somebody, is there a problem in your department? They're going to say no, you know, because nobody wants to admit to the fact that they've got problems. So if you want to find out if there's problems in a department somewhere, you get somebody outside that department to examine it. Because if you're in that department, you're going to be biased. So you get somebody that's
Especially
outside.
if you're the manager of that department, you're going to be biased.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, you know, and speaking of the cybersecurity, I cannot for the life of me understand why those amendments that I requested to go into that cybersecurity program, I don't know why they wouldn't put those in. You know, we were at a first reading, so if you added those amendments in, then you'd still be at a first reading, and you could go to your second reading next time. But for some reason or other, they didn't want those particular amendments put in there at this time. So I can guarantee you that the first council meeting in January, I'll be bringing those amendments up because I want to get those into that cybersecurity agreement. You know, you can stand back and you can say, we're already doing that. We're already doing this. We've been doing that. But until it's in a system or a program, there's no guarantee that they'll continue doing it.
Right. Exactly. And Jay, this is a good segue for you and Bobbie to add some commentary on this. The thing that I look at it's vindication, auditor of state. I mean, we already had it. We already had enough. But I think the fact that it came up now when it did, when the city is in fiscal caution, in this austerity environment, and a firm statement, and also a firm statement that we're looking into new financial software systems. So software solutions, something that actually works, something that is local, something probably that comes with a far less cost, according to what we've been told, than what New World did, or probably their service fees currently. So that's the positive out of this. I think if the only way that you're ever going to get the finances, the books in line, you can sit there and you can complain about Miranda McGinnis, you can complain about Robert Landon. Kelly Carr had her issues and stuff at certain times. I don't think that anybody would be successful in that. How can you? If you're reporting within your system, it's giving you completely effed up reports that are inconsistent, one after another, how is anybody supposed to function with that?
Well, see,
So,
these issues that we have poured over with Veritas, these are indications of a very deeply flawed software system. I'm not sure exactly where it's flawed. I know that we had guessed before I came and started talking to council people. We had guessed that there were other software safety controls off, and that has also been confirmed. And then it was reinforced when they found that GL override to be misconfigured, which we've got a lot of evidence to show that that had been misconfigured for a long time. Now, another thing is that people are like, well, wouldn't the auditor of state have found that during a general controls audit, which is like a spot check audit? They were talking about some kind of forensic audit that was done in 22 or so. That's not a forensic audit. That's a general controls or a spot check audit. We know that there was widespread access to the system. I don't know the permission levels. I know the former deputy auditor who left, when Landon came on board, we have documented evidence of unimpeded administrative access.
for those of you in the
Right.
audience.
And so what you have here is a situation where we don't know who was driving the ship and what access levels they had. So in theory, this is a theory. I don't want any cease and desist orders or, crazy messages coming to me, but a theory in the IT sector, Bobbie would Ralph would probably agree with me on this. If you've got people with admin access that nobody knows about, they can go in there and fix stuff up to make it look better for an inspection, say. So, you know what I mean? And after they left, we're aware of, I'm not sure what access levels, but people from the previous administration that had access to the New World software that had no business need whatsoever. I don't know the access levels, but these are scenarios that you can see happen. Well, how didn't it get caught? Well, it didn't get caught possibly because you had people with, admin access to every module in the city that were going in there and were able to turn things on and off, or had backdoors or connections with the vendor, whatever crazy was going on. So the red flag scenario here, this system's not going to fix everything if you don't have proper controls in place, and the old system has to be looked at very closely. The audit still needs to happen, the IT audit, because as of the audit, the financial audit I'm talking about, that came out in November that we poured over, in conjunction with this newest announcement that we already knew for many, many years. Neither the books, the financial books, nor anything that this system has to say can be relied upon whatsoever. Mr. Ralph and Bobbie, would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that until you get the old system straightened up, you can't really switch anything over. Right. And depending on, I know we don't want to let the new system sit there and get nothing done, and until we get done with that old system, because it may take years. Right. It could at least months, more than likely more than a year, to go in there and find out what the problems were. So right. I think that if you go back to where we knew we had some good figures, a good balance, a zero balance or whatever, and then start working forward on that as we get certain things cleared up, we can transfer that to the new system.
There's a lot of, sorry, go ahead, Ralph.
No, go ahead. I was about to finish.
So with the original implementation of New World, I know that it's claimed that it was ran side by side for, I believe, I have varying quotes, but most of them say a year. No, it wasn't. The timeline's not there. We can also prove that by immediate software safety controls obviously being off. They couldn't reconcile. They were having problems all the way from the installation to when it was finally admitted in right around 21, 22, and Veritas got involved and all that crazy went down. But we do have some recommendations, and I know Ralph and Bobbie have been involved in these articles extensively. I send them drafts. We strongly recommend bringing an actual IT oversight committee that actually does something, that has oversight, and a ticketing system. The ticketing system is mandatory. It is not a choice. Neither is the oversight committee at this point. With the infractions that we've seen over a period of 20 years, And before that, there were still, things being mentioned about password sharing in the official audits going back into the 80s. So this is basically a culture of loose IT and financial controls. The trouble ticketing system would not only provide a digital paper trail for the vendor, when you call the vendor, you open up your own ticket, they have their ticket system, but who's to say they're using theirs? So, but it would also say that, say Cody or Ralph calls the IT guy for a permission change, and the IT guy leaves a year later and nobody can figure out why Cody has admin access in New World, they can go back and look and see exactly when that was done. The IT Oversight Committee would need to be provided with a report of all these changes and to provide some kind of oversight, because obviously oversight is a serious problem here. The other question that we're getting, and I know Bobbie and I and Ralph discussed this, a lot of people are saying, what justifies an actual forensic audit? Well, there's a standard general controls audit or a spot check audit, which we know is done somewhat often, but it's a high level overview. A forensic IT audit is to look over a compromised system. There's specific checks that qualify, and Marion qualifies for every single one of them. Ineffective internal controls. We know that it was never accurate. It was just said it will never be accurate. So that leads any trained IT professional to say, well, then it was never accurate. And we can prove that going back to Veritas and the other documents and audit reports and things of that nature. Override controls, credential abuses, super user access. We just talked about that. The override of controls also is the GL override and all the other software switches. So that's the second flag. The third flag, physical security breach. It is never okay to use a server room as an office, period. I don't care who is in there. I wanted my office in the server. Remember that, Bobbie?
Yeah, and that still gets me. Like I still kind of like what?
Right.
Like I still look at that and I go back and I read some of those articles and it's like, how in the world are they using that for an office?
So there's all kinds of violations. It could be violations of laws with some of this stuff, but I kind of left that out in this one. I'm trying to give the public a quick but thorough breakdown. Flawed implementation, the workaround culture. It is never okay to leave service accounts enabled, have people with administrative access that don't need it, provide people with access to a system, or do workarounds for 15 years. That's never okay, because you have a snowball effect of the outcome that we're seeing right now. Persistent ignored warnings. Persistent ignored warnings are the Veritas. We see it mentioned in city council and finally admitted, which Cody calls vindication. All that stuff is involved in that. To a trained, anybody that's worked in telecom or IT or call centers, or anybody that, takes payments over the phone that's in management at one of those facilities, they would know things about PCI, payment card industry compliance. And I was actually blessed to go through a full PCI compliance in the company that Bobbie and I worked for together. And it was something else, man. It's complicated. So it can get crazy, and there's a lot of checks and balances that the city of Marion is missing here, and it's highly, highly concerning. Without knowing what the information that we're getting from the New World system, validating it using a forensic method, can you pass it on to the new system and be able to count on those numbers? Or we'll just be right back to what in the hell's going on here.
Mm-hmm.
I do have contacts that work in other financial places or offices in and around Marion that I've been friends with my whole life that use this software that, by the way, Mr. Landon had tried to get them to go with. And they seem to like it a lot. And I've done a little bit of research. I've never used that software, but it's an Ohio-based
solutions you're talking about.
Right. It's an Ohio-based firm, and the auditor of state seems to like it. The research that I have done on municipalities, New World versus this one, New World, guys, it's a train wreck. and it has been. It's got multiple lawsuits that were won or pending against their various products. Tyler Technologies is the main conglomerate. But we have vendor negligence. So one thing that the audit can also help with is gathering evidence to use if the vendor, which would be New World, is negligent in their agreement with the city. So I'm kind of starting to get the feel here that this is being talked about, and the software vendor is not admitting to things because they're afraid that they may be legally liable. So they're just kind of trying to ignore it and hope it goes away. So a forensic audit while we're switching this over would also help with that. And then, of course, concealment. We know there were thefts. We know there were various, problems with checks and cards, and it took 3.5 years to catch somebody stealing tens of thousands of dollars. That is a huge red flag. Mr. Ralph, Bobbie, do you agree on that in the IT area?
100%.
3.5 years, like that's crazy. So that's
yeah.
That should have been caught the first time it happened.
right. I know that I've been able to piece it together talking to, people that were around the office and, doing the newspaper thing and the record thing. It looks to us like the numbers were manipulated. This person probably had higher access, and we are aware that this was brought to the attention of certain people, one of which was Twyla Lang. And we already knew that, but she had, ended up admitting it to us after we got to talking to her after a while, because we had heard it through the network, as I call it. It's never okay to target an employee or discredit somebody as being crazy who is trying to blow the whistle on something like this. These softwares are designed, the specific purpose is to safeguard taxpayer funds, period. And with these safety controls being off and these huge deficits, overspending, and you've got, councilmen asking questions in official council minutes about how are they able to do this? Isn't there some kind of lock? And then the answer from the current auditor, it almost leads me to believe that she has no idea, because she said, I don't get into the day-to-day operations. No, that's a serious problem. That needs to be looked at immediately. If they're able to simply override and overspend, that's a software control.
Mm-hmm.
So the new software absolutely is a must. This workaround cycle that we've been going through for the past 20 years or so, it's got to stop. That's never okay. Garbage in, garbage out is the term. I'm sure Ralph has heard that before. I know Bobbie has. If you put garbage into the new system, you're going to get garbage out of the new system. The software can be the best software in the world, but if the garbage, the information that's coming into it is garbage, it's never going to perform well. I absolutely, and I always have, ever since, 2019, when we were reporting on this stuff before, wanted to see the city get on a different software. This thing's been a train wreck since it was put into place, and we can prove that. I don't know why some people don't want to talk about it. I don't know why some people like to, call us conspiracy theorists. That's what got Bobbie involved in it. She's a very good friend of mine. She worked with me. She knows my level of ethics and how serious I am about this stuff. And she was like, these people are just being angry. And I was like, I mean, I know. And then she read a couple of the articles. She was like, what is really going on up there? And that's what Ralph was ready to go gun ho, to talk to Bales right away. But like I said last night, and then I'll shut up so the other two can talk. If I thought that we needed to go, higher, we would, but we're seeing indications of things moving from an experienced IT administrator perspective. There's things going on. So we send emails, then we see, something happen, and then something's announced. And then, the fiscal caution and Bill asking for guidance on the, how a forensic audit is gone about. And then all this stuff happens. And so we're seeing signs that they're actually moving on this. And we do talk to some of the officials. I talk to Ralph a lot. I talk to Twyla sometimes when she's allowed to talk about it. I don't put people in compromising positions. Oh, tell me this. I won't tell. You know what I mean? That's not good. And we know some of that's going on, but that's not Marion Watch. We're trying to get to the bottom of this. There's got to be accountability. We got to figure out what went on. We got to figure out if there were modules that were purchased. This software was expensive. If there were modules that were purchased that were third party to help things work better, that weren't used for a period of time, that's not a legal way to use taxpayer funds, and that needs to be recovered and looked at. This is a very serious problem. Mr. Ralph, Bobbie, anything?
Bobbie, you got anything?
No, I don't have anything to add. I made a comment to Jason earlier today, but I noticed the article, and with what he said in the beginning about putting an IT committee together to where they oversee this and putting a ticket system together. I wholly support that's what's needed.
And they had one. They had a IT committee, and then they disbanded it.
Right, but they didn't use it like they were supposed to. Like, I mean, they should be meeting at least on a weekly basis and going over everything. But even if they had a committee and they weren't meeting, they weren't using that committee as intended. So it wasn't going to be helpful anyway.
That's right. Yeah.
Which brings me to a question that's been on my mind for a while. And I know that committee was not consulted when the New World system was purchased, and neither was council. From what I wasn't in council in 2009, so I don't know firsthand, but I've been told by other members that council was not approached as far as the New World system goes. And my question is, why not? Because to me, that would logically have to happen in order to purchase a $900,000 system. I just don't know. But then again, why was it such a rush job that we had to come in and get this new system and get it up right away? Why do we have to do that? Because every system that I know of, if it's going to die off in a certain time and support is going to be stopped at a certain date, they let you know that ahead of time. They let you know that
in advance, right?
At least 6 months ahead of time.
Right. Yeah, at least.
Yeah, because they had that new incoming class, which was 7 Democrats on council, and then that was Schertzer as mayor, and that was Kelly Carr as auditor. So they come in January 1st, 2008, and then in October of 2008, that's when they approved the contract with New World. So, and they said that, oh, we have to do this right away. It's an emergency initiative because our New World, or their old software system, that contract was expiring January 1st, 2009, I think it was, or so they kind of rushed things through. But I'm thinking, well, you had 10 months, you should have, like you said, you should have probably been notified in May or June of 08, you would think. And you would have had additional time to do investigations into different software products, which one worked best, put a little bit of thought, do your due diligence. Doesn't sound like they did that.
Right. And we can prove that by, just the rushed implementation of it and then the outcome directly after it was brought online all of a sudden. It's very highly suspicious. I know Ralph's very suspicious. Bobbie's very suspicious. Anybody in the IT sector I've ever talked to about this particular subject is very suspicious, because this is kind of going into an enterprise type system. It's just a government. So hardware, there's end of life dates on hardware and software. Generally speaking, your IT staff or whoever handles this license renewal stuff in the city would know this stuff years sometimes in advance, usually 12 months or more with software. I've never worked in IT where there was an enterprise grade, enterprise wide software that was getting ready to expire, and it was, oh, we didn't know about that. It's 12 to 18 months we start doing the parallel systems. Bobbie's been through this with me before. We went from hard phones to soft phones. We went from, the systems that we use to, track employees and things like that, kind of similar to ADP. We switched over to something like that. We switched over to, different proxies and things to control internet traffic. And every time we did that and we brought up a new system, we would run the system side by side for a while to make sure that system B, which is the test system, the beta, wasn't going to fail or miss anything. You know what I mean? You're kind of running in parallel. And we see mentions of that, but we have a lot of people telling us that it didn't go on as long as they like to try to lead on, or not all departments were compatible with the software. We know utility billing, we have a lot of people telling us that it was never really good for several departments, and that's one of them. And I think sanitation, if I'm not mistaken, was another one, but I have to look that up. But we've got so much data.
Well, utility billing was the big one.
Right.
And it was also suspicious that the former manager for utility billing, Brian Carr, was fired by Schertzer. Now,
Right.
Carr was hired, had been there for a long time, and hired when Jack Kellogg, the former Republican mayor of Marion, was in office for 16 years. So Brian Carr was hired. No relation to Kelly Carr, as far as I am aware. Brian Carr kind of rings the bell, sounds the alarm on the issues with New World not being compatible with utility billing, which back in 2009, 2010, there were about $4.5 to $5 million regularly being transacted through utility billing. So by
Right.
far, not only a volume of money, but also the number of transactions. Because when you're dealing with people's utility accounts for utility bills, there's 35,000 people in the city of Marion. I think there's like 12,600 households. So if you think that number of utility accounts plus the business accounts that have utility accounts, there's a lot of transactions coming through there. So to me, that's the number one sector of Marion's economy or Marion's finances from a transactional basis, that if it doesn't work there, then the ripple effects are going to be
Right.
huge. And they come in and they fire Carr and then replace him with Brenda Dyer Nwaso, and we all know what happened with her. She embezzled a significant amount of money, finally gets caught after 3 years, and just a lot of weird circumstances, and it all comes back usually to New World and utility billing.
Right.
What do you think, Ralph?
Well, yeah, everything that I've heard so far points back at New World. To me, it's just what we need to do now is we have to move forward. And you were talking about New World running side by side and everything, and that was an entire system. Look how long it has taken us with ADP to get the payroll set over, and it's still not right. I was shorted $3 and some cents on my last paycheck, so there's something that's just not quite right on there yet. So we still have to work on that. But that has taken us 10 or 11 months to get that going. I know that the mayor brought that up at the beginning of the year that he wanted to switch over. And here it is, December, and I don't think it's accurate yet. So how much longer would it take to do a whole entire system like New World to get that thing up and running properly? So I want us to, if we're going to get a new system, clean up the old system, transfer the stuff over that you know is correct and accurate, and then we'll have a good place to start.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's crucial, and it's reassuring that finally some action is going to be taken. Mayor Collins said that he is meeting. I don't know if it was this week or next week. He's meeting with Software Solutions and probably some other vendors, I imagine, after that, just to kind of get some preliminary information and maybe try to put a plan to do a core system conversion. And, you know, unless and until that's done, as the state of Ohio has made it clear, the auditor of state, New World doesn't work. It isn't working for Marion. It hasn't worked for Marion. You have to move on to something else.
And
And
it never will work either.
yeah, yeah. And I don't think anybody, you could have the best government accountant. That's why Veritas threw its hands up.
Right.
And basically fired the city. Because they said, we can't do anything. Can't work. Now there was also the Miranda McGinnis.
I'd be interested in the meeting where when with Software Solutions, when they say, well, we're transferring over from New World, and I wonder what the Software Solutions people are going to, what their reaction is going to be, because I just have a feeling you're going to say, oh no, any system with that.
Get a statement. I mean, I don't know if they would have any take notes, deliver that at council. Say, this is what Software Solutions said, their opinion on our situation with New World. I asked them of their opinion. This is what they said.
Right.
It's got to be out there. It's been out there, but that has to be a main focus. And I think it's clear by what Colin said, that the auditor of state said, this is part of the plan of action that the city has to engage in. It has to put a plan together to dump New World and get a functioning system. And it's good that it's finally happening. It's the same thing. I've heard several people say, oh well, Colin's probably didn't need to go to the auditor of state and request the fiscal distress analysis. Well, that should have been done, could have been done, was more than justifiable years ago, and nobody did it.
The forensic IT audit technically has been justifiable since, at very least, the first mention of corrupt data by the forensic financial auditors.
Yeah, and that's the IT. I'm talking the state of Ohio coming in and doing their fiscal distress analysis.
Right.
Like, why wasn't that done? If they were all aware, let's say 2022, if they're all aware and they're saying, oh, we have no clue, we haven't reconciled, we lost our bond rating, all that stuff, why didn't they do it then? Why didn't they say, hey, state, come in here, take a look at it, help us out? They didn't do it.
I think a lot of that depends on the leadership of the city, and I think we've got the leaders in there now that are wanting to do something. They feel that they owe it to the citizens of Marion to make sure things are correct and that their tax money is being used for the right purpose, which is to support the services that they need for the city, and that's the way I think this administration is.
Yeah, no, I commend that action. It was what should have been done. It needed to be done. The system needs to be switched, gotten rid of. You need to look at all departments and try to make them as efficient as possible. You need to pursue new revenue sources. You can't have these fees and fares that haven't increased in 20 years when we have experienced the worst inflation ever in our history since 2008, when they started quantitative easing, and that was the policy of the Treasury and the federal government, also the Federal Reserve, of printing all this money and buying Treasury bonds and monetizing the debt, essentially. And then after COVID, 2020 and up till now, it's just gotten that much worse. I mean, we have 36 trillion and counting national debt. There's been a lot of inflation since 2004. So if you want to say, oh, well, transit is supposed to, help people. No, transit, if you look at the audits, transit started out as an enterprise fund. That's how it was in the audit reports. It was considered an enterprise fund. Now it's considered a special revenue fund, but the theory is the same. It's the government engaging in a business activity that should rightfully and used to be done by the private sector. Marion had taxi companies in the 1970s and 1980s. What put them out of business? Marion Area Transit. Subsidized fares, and even though the ridership is abysmal, I published that data. On average, for every hour that they're operating, Marion Area Transit, the entire fleet, has on average 6 riders. If you take the total cost of Marion Area Transit and you look at their total miles driven, it's just under $10 a mile for them to operate. I mean, the average taxi is $1.50 to like $3.50 a mile. And that you'd be paying $3.50 in a major urban area, New York City or Chicago, somewhere really expensive and congested. So it's highly inefficient, and it's not operating on a self-sufficient basis, even through grant money. It gets most of its money through grant money coming from state and federal sources. If you look at the fare proportion, it's almost non-existent. I mean, they're making no money off of these fares, and then they're operating at a deficit. And then what happens, Ralph? They go to the general fund, and the general fund has to subsidize them. So the taxpayers are subsidizing this highly inefficient service or department. So that's another example. You got to look at ways to at least make that to where you're not constantly going to the general fund, you're not going to the taxpayers to subsidize it even further. So big part of that would be you got to look and say, well, hell, you were paying $1 in 2004. Well, let's adjust that dollar for inflation. So now the equivalent of $1 in 2004 is $2 in 2025 or whatever it is. Say we're going to adjust it for inflation. Even if you're not going to adjust it to where it's self-sustaining, that it balances out without going to the general fund, at least, you're raising it based on inflation. Am I wrong in that?
No, I think you're spot on. I think that a service that we provide should be at a zero cost. We need to have the fares to match what it costs, and we also need to be on the other end, try to reduce those expenses as much as we can. And that means, looking at your route schedules, looking at the ridership, seeing, okay, we have a lot of people in between these hours, but not very many people between these hours. So either cut out the bus service during those hours and shift it to pick up more people. I suggested that at the council meeting the other night when they were talking about losing the night moves bus, and there's going to be some people that use that bus. Well, if we've got a bus that's running from 9 in the morning till noon and it has one person between that time period, let's move the schedule from noon to 8 or 9 at night and maybe pick up a few people that we can get to work.
Yeah, that would be fair. And that's how, anybody in the private sector that has managed a business, that's the type of when it hits your bottom line as a business owner or somebody in the private sector, when you're accountable for it, then you will make those necessary changes to your business so that you can remain profitable. And unfortunately, the public sector, government, doesn't care because they're operating on other people's money, or at least they don't operate typically with the same amount of care. So that would be a thing if you're transit director and you're looking at increasing efficiency, maximizing efficiency, so that you can still sustain yourself and offer a service to it's a small population. I mean, that's the other thing. Everybody wants to say, oh, well, this one-legged person rides the bus. Well, okay, I feel bad for that person, and they're getting a service through, that's great, but you can't say it's a blank check. No matter what we have to do, we have to get this one-legged person, even if it costs us $1 million a year, we have to transport them down Center Street. Like, you have to look at what is feasible. And I think adjusting those, like you said, saying what routes, what's the ridership, what are our hot routes, which ones aren't, what hours aren't, and is there an alternative in the evening? I'm not opposed to that. I mean, as much as I think that the public sector is probably more efficient and should be dealing with transit and things like that, as opposed to government, if you're going to have it, because you say, oh, well, we get this grant money, okay. I mean, we're paying our state income taxes, our federal income taxes. I'm not opposed unless we abolish. I would like to see those abolished. I would love to see the state income tax. We didn't have one until 1972. I'd love to go back to where we're not paying a state income tax. I think Ohio would be much better off.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact of the matter is we do have one. So we might as well get what we can get, but that doesn't mean that we operate those grant-funded or majority grant-funded programs, that we operate those in a deficit, that we are inefficient in our operation. So you got to look at the revenues, the fares, and that was all shot down. I know that Julie Welsh tried to bring that up earlier in the year, and people were having a fit over a relatively modest increase. And you just got to get over that shit. Pardon my language. That mindset. You can't have all this government operating inefficiently, costing all this money, running negative fund balances, and not be willing to pay for it. If you want big government services, you have to pay for them. It's
Exactly.
pretty simple. Am I wrong?
No, I think you're spot on again. Nothing in this world is free. Somebody pays for everything that we have and everything that we do. It may not be me having to pay for something, but if I get a service for something, you can guarantee that somebody somewhere is paying for that. And what we have to do is to make sure that, number one, if they pay for it, they pay the least amount they have to pay. You don't want them to pay twice the price. But also we have to make sure that as a person that provides the service, that we're not paying more to give that service than we should. We have to make sure that what we pay for a service is accurate, it's reasonable, and you don't want to be, for example, if you want to buy a new bus in order to have another route, you don't want to go out and pay $500,000 for a bus when you can get another one for 100,000. And so that's only good custodial means of taking care of your public, the tax-paying public.
Right, exactly. And that's got to be across every department. If you do that, it'll pay dividends. If you run things efficiently, you're good stewards with the taxpayers' hard-earned dollars. You invest in good software systems. You implement the IT protocols like Jason was talking about. Everything will be much better. When you're irresponsible, when you're inefficient, then you get into these problems with your budget, and then people are critical of you, and you're going to have to try to raise revenues to cover for mismanagement on your behalf for years. And that's pretty much where the city of Marion's at. It has largely been mismanaged for a long period of time, and the solution up to this point has been to bail out government instead of fixing it by passing the income tax. The first income tax was supposed to be temporary. Marion passed it in 1959 at 0.6%, and it was supposed to go away after a year. Well, it never went away, and it's just slowly been increased up to the point where we're at 2% today. Well, the irresponsible, the irresponsible thing to do would say, well, we're going to have to pass another 0.5%, 2.5% income tax, because that's counteractive, or works against your competitiveness to attract additional business investment.
Right.
So you can't tax, you're going to tax all your businesses out of town. And I am convinced that historically, the implementation of the state income tax in 1972, combined with municipal income taxes and municipal income tax increases, largely resulted in Marion losing all of its major businesses back in the 70s and the 80s. You put that on top of national things like high inflation, also some of these stupid trade agreements that the federal government entered into, and the unions that were very strong in Marion back in those days. And it kind of was a perfect storm, but you have to be competitive. If a business is looking and saying, I'm going to relocate my business, 300 workers, to somewhere in Ohio, and they go to Findlay, Ohio, which has a 1% municipal income tax, or they go look at Marion, it's got a 2%. Where are you going to pick?
Right.
Probably Findlay. So that's my argument, is you fix things, you get things running efficiently, then maybe you're in a position where instead of having to bail out your municipal government by increasing taxes, maybe you could be at a sustainable level to where you can start looking at lowering it at some point. We're not there. Don't get me wrong, we're not there. That's the other thing I said about the tax credit that they passed in 2023. Well, when you're talking out of one side of your mouth, Ayers Ratliff, saying, oh, the city's finances, we don't know where we're at, and blah, 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 and this is bad and everything. And then out of the other side of your mouth, you say, well, I think that we can afford to give a 100% tax credit to Marion City residents who work outside of the city. So
Yeah, I think
which
that's
is
the
it? Are we in a position where we can sacrifice revenues because we're strong financially? Or are we questionable financially? And if we are questionable financially, then maybe we shouldn't be cutting tax revenue sources, right? Am I wrong? Am I being a jerk?
Well, I know that the auditor of state said concerning this fiscal caution that there's two things that we need to do. One, we need to cut expenses, and the other was we need to increase revenue. And between the two of them, we can pull ourselves out of this hole and correct the problem. But I think that ordinance in 2023 was wrong. I've stated that before. And I know that the people that live in Marion and work out of town that receive the benefit of that rebate disagree with that, I'm sure. But there were 4 people on council that voted on that ordinance that benefited financially from that ordinance. And to me, that's a violation of ethics. Ethics law says that
The
you cannot
sponsor,
vote.
the sponsor was a beneficiary of that too, Ralph.
Right. And ethics law says that you cannot vote on anything that you have a financial interest in, or if you have a personal interest in it. You're not, you abstain. Look at Sean Barr. Sean Barr abstains from any ordinance or resolution that has to do with construction because he's in the construction business, and anything that he would vote on could possibly benefit him. And so he abstains. That's what should have happened when they raised this up for a vote in 2023, that those people who benefited, and there were 4 on council at the time that voted, should not have voted. And I know from the minutes of the meeting that the question was brought up and the law director said, go ahead and vote on it. But I think that's a violation of ethics.
Yeah, like you said it perfectly. I mean, if you have some vested interest in it, some conflict of interest, then you should recuse yourself from that vote. And, that's just clear ethics. So, well, we've run a little bit long here. I'm going to give you the opportunity for a final comment, Ralph, before we close.
All right. Well, same comment that I usually make, and I appeal to the people of Marion. Get involved. Call your councilman. Come to the council meetings, and see what's going on, and make your voice heard. Because if you sit back and don't say a word, nobody knows what you need. Nobody knows what you want until you speak up. So come to the meetings, call your council person, and let them know how you feel.
Very smart. You got to be engaged. If you want to have a functioning republic, then it requires engagement on your behalf. You have to be aware of what's going on, and you have to be involved, and don't complain. Don't complain if there's issues, that come up that impact you, and then you're just blindsided by it, and then you get pissed off, and then you want to raise hell and bitch and moan and everything. Well, maybe if you were involved the entire time, or at least paying attention, reaching out to your councilman, going to the council meetings and going up to the podium, every resident of the city of Marion has the right to address council. And believe me, there's a lot of people who take advantage of that right sometimes. But that's the way it's supposed to work. So if you want to go up there and you want to give them a piece of your mind, then do it. But try to also, do it in a constructive way. Don't just go up there and complain and that sort of thing. I mean, if you have a suggestion, you have an idea, these people, they're regular people. They live in your neighborhoods. They go to the same grocery store that you go to, same gas station that you go to, and they put their pants on one leg at a time, just like you do. So they're more than willing to hear you out. And, if you articulate yourself well and make a good argument, you probably will have a good chance at having your voice heard and possibly your ideas and suggestions implemented. But if you don't pay attention, you don't do shit, you just sit on the couch and watch TV or browse the internet or stuff your face with bonbons or Cheetos, then you get what you get. So, Jay, any final comment?
No, I'm actually pretty impressed with the way that the senior administration and the counselors who actually understand what's going on and want to address this financial and IT issue. It's pretty brave what Bill's doing. I can't imagine the pressure that he and some of the council members, finance committee, are under. I know, like I said, we talked to Twyla on occasion, we talked to Ralph and others, and from what I understand, it's pretty in-depth conversations going on. So hopefully they can come to some kind of resolution to fix this so it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, well, it will, because now we have the state involved. So
Right.
We did that fiscal distress analysis. We have a plan. If they don't do it, the state will. It'll
Right.
be
You're
fiscal
right.
emergency, and it'll be them managing things pretty well on behalf of the city. So you either fix it on your own, or they will fix it. So
I believe that there was I'll have to look if I can find it. I believe it was in the 80s. Marion was under a similar, I don't think it was fiscal caution, but the auditor of state was involved somehow, and they had to ask for permission for, spending. I'll have to find that. I think it was in the 80s.
they never cut. That was under Doc Brown's administration in the late 80s, and he came in and said, "Oh, I'm gonna take a broom and clean up this city and do all these cuts." Then the unions and everybody pitched a fit, and then what was the solution? Hey, let's raise the income taxes, and that's what they did. So
That seems to
you can't
be
go down-
always the go-to.
that's
Raise
the
taxes.
go-to.
Yeah.
You know, you want to avoid that because it's counterproductive to economic development. You
Right.
need economic development. You need private capital investment in the city, but you got to fix your shit to get to that point where maybe down the line, at some point, if you're really functioning efficiently, you can still offer core services, but then maybe you would have enough money to where you can start looking at cutting municipal income taxes. So anyway, we've had a lot of really good discussion here tonight on the Watchmen's Report. We thank everybody for tuning in. Be sure to check out our YouTube channel, check out marionwatch.com, check out our Facebook feed. We're constantly uploading articles between the many contributors that we have on Marion Watch. So be sure to check those out. And we've got committee meetings coming up this Monday. So if you are looking to get involved, go check out a committee meeting. Just sit there and observe. And if you have something you want to address, go up to the podium and address it. So that's all we got for you tonight. And until next time, for Councilman Ralph Smith, for Jason Foreman, I'm Cody Higley, and this has been the Watchman's Report. And remember, folks, a watchman is always vigilant. Have a good night.
Have a good night, guys.
Good night.